Good morning, and those who are watching online, welcome. And I have a friend of mine, WH, with me today, and we're going to do a little discussion on the release of the hostages and what that might mean for the future. So I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and we'll
Okay.
move on from there.
Okay. Well, day before yesterday was a pretty momentous day. I was watching online live feeds to see what was going to happen because the organization called Hamas is not, they play games, they play psychological games when they can, but I guess they were severely crushed. I mean, I'm sure they were, but to the point where they couldn't play any more games. And I don't know how Trump did it. I don't know where he got the leverage to make them go for this agreement. But because a lot of the people that I listened to online in Israel, were very skeptical that anything was even going to happen because in previous situations similar to this, Hamas would get up to the brink and then say, we can't do this, sorry about that, and whatever. And then they'd launch a few rockets or whatever. And so a lot of people were pretty skeptical if anything was going to happen. And so the other day was the agreed upon day for the beginning of this agreement to take place. And so I got up, my normal time, and things were supposed to start happening in the morning. So I started watching on stream or live stream coverage of it beginning about 9:30 over here, and Trump didn't speak until about 2:30. So it was a long wait, but we did get to see the hostages coming back from Gaza, and a lot of people were very, 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 very happy about it. Hamas authorities were supposed to include, after the release of the 20 living hostages, they were supposed to include uh, the people who had died in captivity, and they were supposed to return the remains. And that was supposed to be very, very quickly, and they haven't done that. Israel has released some of the prisoners that were arrested over here in Israel for crimes. These were not innocent civilians that Israel had in custody. They were criminals who had committed murder or other lesser things, not necessarily just murder, but some were murderers, some were like multiple murders, and some of them were already released uh, in accordance with the first parts of the agreement. And then Israel was waiting for the return of the uh, deceased hostages, and Hamas was unable. I don't know if they're unable or whatever, or if they're doing it on purpose. I suspect because of the chaos in Gaza at the present time that they were unable to locate some of them, and also they say it all the time that the tunnels underneath Gaza are longer than the New York subway system.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of ground to cover. And to find out where they might have buried, you know, the Hamas people brutally attacked Israel on October 7th in 2023, showing that when it comes to extending their violence against Israelis, they are unwavering, no moral conscience. They did terrible, terrible things, and so there's no way to know what they did with the bodies. I mean, some of the people that were killed in Israel during the October 7th were cut up, mutilated, and there's a very disturbing uh, very disturbing story of a couple who had a baby, and the Hamas invaders tied them, the husband and the wife, together, and then they started torturing them as they're tied together. And then, well, for one thing, they cut off at least one of the, and they gouged the husband. And while there's, and maybe they did other things as well. While they were tied together, they put their little in front of their faces so that the last thing they would see is their little baby being burned alive, more or less. And so, what happens to the bodies of the hostages there in Gaza is like anyone's guess, to be honest. And so, and then there are other films around about the Bibas family. They were a couple. I think the husband was released, but the wife and their like little toddlers were not released. And they were very well known in Israel because they were redheaded. The kids were redheaded, really bright red hair. And it's that family goes back very far back in Jewish history. So they're well known. And they showed pictures of Mrs. Bibas with holding one of her kids up here and grabbing the arm of another one down on the ground. And she is definitely shook up because of the people yelling at her or whatever. And they're in Gaza by then. And then later, like months later, they said, she got killed. And she was strangled. She was strangled to death with her kids by the Hamas people. Her body and her kids' bodies did come back. They identified her. They said, yes, it was her. And they said, yes, she was strangled to death. So Israelis over here that live in this country don't have the highest regard for the word of people of Hamas. They just don't. Unfortunately, there are a lot of Israelis. I mean, I'm talking not most of the Israelis, but there are a sizable number of Israelis who, I'll use the word left to describe their political orientation, even though it might not be exactly left, but it's definitely not pro-Israel in the sense that Israel needs to defend itself strongly and welfare of the people. The big thing that these people want is a two-state solution, even if Hamas doesn't want two states. And that's the thing. The Hamas charter calls for the destruction of the people of Israel, the Jewish people. They say the Jewish people have to be eradicated until there's no more Jewish state. The radical Hamas is Islamic. And Islam, as it's come through the ages there, says that anything that was once ever under Islamic control, any land that was ever under Islamic control, if it ever gets captured by some other group, like the people of Israel, the land of Israel, then they have to be destroyed or driven out to the point that there is no non-Islamic nation there. And so that is in their charter. It's in the Hamas charter, and lots of people in Israel know it. And even the people that know it kind of like go, they're just going through a stage. They'll get over it if we just give them a state. It's like, yeah, right. So those are those people on the left that particularly don't like Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, because Prime Minister Netanyahu could only form a government here in Israel by aligning with a lot of the people who are to the right of center politically. And that means they're pro-Israel, they're pro-defense, and they're pro-responding to terrorist attacks harshly. And for example, they don't want Iran to acquire nuclear weapons anytime soon. So the right, and basically, I've been over here for quite a long time, and I've voted in a couple of elections here in Israel. and used to be fairly split, like a kind of a V, where you get center, and to me, this is my right, and this is the left. So it's like this V of this group of people of parties in Israel, because it's not just two parties. There's bunches of parties. The last time I voted, there were 41 little tickets that you could vote for, the tickets of parties that existed in Israel. 41. Now, most of them don't pass the threshold of being able to be counted, because there's just too few people to vote for those, the taxi drivers union or something like that, or the green people, or the cannabis people, or the this people, or the that people. There's all kinds of different groups that try to get, an election, somebody elected into the parliament. And so most of the 41 parties don't get close to passing this threshold that you have to pass to be able to be considered. Usually it's about 10 parties. So you still got to deal with 10 parties. And about 3 or 4 of those, 2 or 3 or 4, depending, are Arab parties. And so there you got 7 or maybe 8 Israeli parties, and maybe 2 or 3 or 4 Arab parties, depending on how the election works out. And the thing is, there's no complaints after the election. Everybody says, yeah, it was fair. Everybody got the votes counted, and they get counted within the day. It's like having participated in American voting way back when, and then for me, it's watching online what has happened the last couple of times, which is questionable, about how the votes were counted. It just, well, kind of depressing to watch the United States go through all that, when lots of countries, including India, they can cast their votes, count them in one day. I wonder why it takes America a month or more. Anyway, so you got people over here that they don't like the idea that there's kind of a populist movement in Israel that could run Israel into a political situation that they don't like. And so they have tried as best they can. I just saw a video yesterday. You've heard of Amir Tsarfati, right?
Yes.
And so he interviewed someone who used to be a leftist in Israel. He's like a professor of law, and he studied at Harvard, including Harvard, even though he was born in Israel. I think he was born in Israel. He's an Israeli, like way back. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. What was his first name? Moshe, I think. Moshe Cohen Eli, something like that. Anyway, he's got his professorship and his PhD, and he teaches here in Israel. And he used to be a part of the elite leftists, which, until he started seeing things that he didn't agree with, and so he's left the elite leftists, who have tried as best they can to get around elections by putting in place judges and supposedly giving them power to just overturn whatever they don't like in Israeli society. They've gone through this big long process that took years of putting in place people that could make these judgments. And that's why Netanyahu has been under investigation. I don't know if you saw that in the link that I sent you, that President Trump tried to ask Israel's President Herzog to give Bibi a pardon, to give Netanyahu a pardon from these charges that are against him, that are like superfluous. It's like somebody gave Netanyahu some champagne, somebody gave him some cigars. And so the left in Israel has been trying to get Netanyahu impeached. In a way, it's impeached. It's not exactly that, but to get him convicted so that he could not continue to be the prime minister. And what they really hoped for was that he would just do a deal, a plea deal, to where he wouldn't have to go through all this trial stuff because it's going to turn out to be baseless. That's what people are already the people that make a difference in commenting in Israel. They've already said this is all baseless. It might not be the wisest thing to do to take cigars from certain people or champagne from certain people or whatever, but it's a waste of time. It's a waste of government money. It's a waste of time, whatever. But they were hoping, according to this professor that left the left, they were hoping that Netanyahu would agree to a plea deal so that he wouldn't get convicted and go to jail, and that he wouldn't ever serve again as the prime minister of Israel. That's what they were hoping for. And Netanyahu said, I'm going to go through with it. And even though that these judges put conditions on him that he had to stay in court for like 8 or 9 hours to be in court during his trial, even though he's the prime minister elected by, well, you can say the majority of the people. He succeeded in forming a government, meaning that he is the legitimate legal prime minister of Israel. And yet these judges wanted to force him to come into depositions, not by him, but by other people, that he had to be there in court, present in court for like 8 or 9 hours a day for like a week at a time. I don't know that part of it, but I know that when he would have to come in, it would be for 8 or 9 hours. And during this war, since October the 7th, he's been pretty busy. And yet they wouldn't give him a, what would you call it there? Where they agree to let the guy not have to come in, whatever that, there's a word for it, which I can't think of. Anyway, they wouldn't do it. They forced him to come in for depositions on cigars and champagne since October the 7th. And it's like, there's a lot of people that say, yeah, put him in jail. And that's the Tel Aviv small crew there of people that, and they're not that small, but it's people that are concentrated in Tel Aviv, and they tend to be supporters of the elitist leftist judges. And so they are trying to make a two-state solution because they don't want Israel. I think that they are afraid, let's put it that way. I think they are afraid of Israel ever having the temple rebuilt. That's what I think. And so they are trying to give Hamas every break they can. Come on, help us give you a two-state. That's kind of the way they look at it. I'm not just making that up. Other people have said it, that they want so badly for Hamas to have a second state so that Israel is never, ever going to be a big powerhouse, not enough to rebuild a temple. Because part of their agenda is, in the two-state solution, is that Jerusalem is going to be given to, part of Jerusalem will be the headquarters of the Palestinian state. And so that's what this gentleman that I talked about there, the Moshe Cohen, who's the professor, he talked about it. He said that there are a lot of people in the army, including the Air Force, that buy into this idea that Israel is mostly a secular state and that should never ever build a temple, Well, they may not say that, but that's what they intend. Um, and so that's why the Air Force was waiting for orders from their commanders who were into the two-state solution, and they didn't give orders. The Netanyahu did not orchestrate October the 7th in any way, shape, or form. He was forced into a situation where his subordinates did not report to him. They did not report to him in a timely way. And some of the main, like the higher ups in Israel, knew that the Hamas organization as a whole had turned on their cell phones at like 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m. on October 7th. 2 a.m., all the Hamas operatives turned on their cell phones, which was a standing known signal among the intelligence groups in Israel to know that Hamas was going to do something. And so, what did the leaders in the intelligence, because they're all on the left, they're all for a two-state solution, they thought, oh no, the Hamas people are getting provoked. They might retaliate. We got to just stay cool, not provoke them to an actual attack. And so that's why they didn't tell Netanyahu. At least that's one report that I've heard. So, in any case, that's part of the situation that nobody hears about unless you can understand Hebrew, which.
Okay. So, it astoundingly, it sounds like politics there is much like politics here in the United States. Looks like they're playing from the same playbook, but I don't want to get too involved in that today. However, you said something I was going to ask you a question about. What does it mean? Well, that's not the right way to phrase it. Will anything come of this? Is it relevant that Trump did ask for a pardon for Netanyahu? Do you think there's enough pull there, enough political sway that anything will
doesn't
change?
work like that. The thing is,
No.
it doesn't work like that. He asked Israel's president to pardon a prime minister from this judgment. The president of Israel doesn't have any authority to do that. He just can't do it. It's not like the United States. So President Trump, thinking in terms of being the president, he's got this pardon power. It just doesn't work like that over here. So it was like, well, it tells Israel that Trump is with Bibi and he thinks that the charges against him are stupid. He says champagne and cigars. That's what he said. So
yeah, there's a 747 involved somewhere here in the U.S. So champagne and cigars kind of pale to that.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of thought that when Trump did that, I thought, well, I don't know. In one way, to me, it's like you're getting involved in another nation's politics. Not a good look when you're in their own, like, Senate room, the Congress or the Senate. Yeah. Not a good look to say, hey, you need to do this. I didn't think, but he also said, this is definitely off script. So this is something he came up with on his own, which that's Trump.
He's kind of known for that.
So I give him credit for the fact that he asked, because he just thinks that it's at a time of war. He called him the president in a time of war, which he meant prime minister at a time of war. And so he praised him. And so Bibi was just happy as a bug in a rug there, because Trump was giving him a lot of praise. And of course, Bibi gave Trump a lot of praise too, Sarah, the bromance, as it was said in certain places online there. They really appreciated each other, which is why I don't think that Israel attacked Doha, the place there in the Qatar, when they tried to go after those Hamas leaders. I think it was coordinated with the United States, because the United States has a big base there, and Israel's just going to fly in, hit a place in that city in Qatar with which the United States might think, it's an attack on us. Who knows? So I think it was all coordinated, which means that there are certain commentators in the United States who said, Netanyahu is a loose cannon. He's doing things that are endangering the entire Middle East. So far, Hamas has given up, although they haven't returned all the dead captives, but they've given up, and I think they're going to be forced to. Trump has got Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, and who else was at the later Sharm el Sheikh meeting there? I think maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe, I don't remember, Qatar. So he's gotten a bunch of people, and he says wealthy countries. I'm really impressed with wealthy countries. Golden age, yes, golden age for Israel, golden age for the Middle East. A lot of gold. I like that gold. That's Trump.
I heard something on the radio yesterday. It was a recount of an interview that I had not seen, and this is how it was proposed that there was this hostage who had been interviewed, who's recently released. So this is pretty fresh information, and I have no way of backing it up, but he had related that whenever the election was going on over here, Hamas wanted Kamala Harris to become president. And
No
when
kidding.
that didn't happen, he said that noticeably the way they treated him, he didn't know about the other hostages, had softened, if I could use that. That's not the phrase he used, but it had changed. And he said that, I don't know that he used the word they feared the president, but they knew that he was not someone who would kind of just play political games. If he said he was going to do something, and it included force, and by the way, after the situation in Iran, it kind of cemented that belief in their minds. Now, is that the leverage? I have no idea. But I found it interesting that story did make it out, and I would not have thought that the election over here would have had that much sway over Hamas. But I think it's quite likely that it does and did. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a few. First of all, Hamas wants to preserve itself. It doesn't want to just get. I mean, they believe in dying. That's what they believe. There's many, many quotations online says, "We believe in dying like Jews believe in living." We believe that dying is the greatest thing we can do for their God. And you believe it or don't believe it, I don't care. You people in the West, and I say I don't mean everybody, but there's a lot of people in the West. They keep saying, "Oh, the poor Palestinians. They just need it. They just need to thaw out and just have somebody pat their head and say, 'Yeah, we accept you in the world community. We want you to thrive as a Palestinian state.'" And the Palestinians, at least the Hamas Palestinians, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, anybody who is following the Quran according to their interpretation of the Muslim Brotherhood is what it boils down to. They want to conquer the world. They want to set up a caliphate for the entire world. They will, and there's different strategies that they use. I don't know if you ever heard of a hudna.
I've heard of it. I don't recall what it means.
Okay, hudna, because the Prophet Muhammad did this hudna. It boils down to make an agreement of peace with your enemy for a limited amount of time. They don't know it's a limited amount of time. They think it's for 10 years. So you do this agreement with them for 10 years. The Muslims will make an agreement with their enemy for 10 years. And then after 2 years, after they get back into strength, back into power, they got the people all trained. Then they say, "Okay, we can break it. We're breaking it." So they break the agreement. They don't have any sacred honor to keep an agreement if it's for 10 years or whatever. They break it whenever they want. So that's hudna. And it's a practice. It is known in the Islamic world. They've done it to Israel at least a few times, hudna. And then there's another one, and I think it's pronounced takiyah, which is, there's a different Hebrew word that is that, which means sounding the trumpet, but that's not what they mean by it. Okay, yeah, if that's the correct pronunciation, I'm sorry if it's not there, but there is a concept among the Muslims of just out and out lying. You tell lies to gain an advantage, and it's Islamic law. So, are they going to ever come to an agreement? I don't know. They're going to the Hamas organization may just leave and go to Tunis or wherever, like the Palestinian Liberation Organization (PLO) did in the '60s. They left, or '70s, I guess it was, '70s or '80s, I don't remember, '70s or somewhere. They left Lebanon. Well, first of all, they left Israel's. They left the what's called the West Bank and Gaza. They left that, and they went up into Lebanon, and they basically infested Lebanon and turned it into an unstable state. And then Israel invaded. Two different Lebanon wars, which were not good, but Israel did it. And they drove the Palestinians out. They went to Tunis in the mid to late '80s, and Israel still managed to go visit in Tunis without passports in particular ways. I know a guy that was one of the visitors there, and I think a Palestinian had a bad accident and didn't survive. So I think they were after him, one of the PLO people. Figure that out for yourself if you want. So, so what I think is, and there's a lot of talk, of course, about, oh, big peace process. This is going to bring it all to a conclusion, which I would say that yes, there's a uh, inclination towards bringing about all that needs to come to place, come into being to start the ball rolling for actual scriptural fulfillment of the times of the end. I mean, we're already kind of on the edges of those things anyway. So I don't think Trump is the Antichrist, and I don't think anybody from the West is the Antichrist. I don't think anybody from England is the Antichrist or anybody else. I think the Antichrist comes from the north of Israel, someplace to the north of Israel. And they don't rule the entire globe, but they have a very, very powerful effect in the broader Middle East, what I would call the Islamic world. And some other fellow that I know, Joel Richardson, has written books on the Islamic Antichrist and so on and so forth. And we conferred about it a long time ago, and I agree with a big portion of what Joel says about the times of the end. Some things I don't agree with. We're still kind of like looking through a glass darkly about a lot of things, and that includes how the scriptures are going to unfold about the end times. And we're definitely closer than we were, a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. We're definitely closer. I think that the people of Israel, they got their hostages back, and if they get the majority of the deceased hostages, people are going to kind of like get over it. They'll get over it and they'll go back to a routine life over here in Israel, which I was kind of in a routine myself. Not that I wasn't paying attention to what's going on, but you get into a kind of routine, and it's like maybe you're not as on the ball as you ought to be. And I think that, I mean, how could October 7th have happened? A big confluence of a bunch of stuff that would catch Israel's leaders in a place where it's like it's the same as, let me just mention this because I was going to mention it earlier about leftists in Israel. In 1967, of course, Nasser in Egypt threatened Israel with annihilation, like a lot of the Arabs have done for a long time. They keep threatening to throw Israel into the sea, and Israel has been steadfast and stout and have stood their ground here in Israel, even though many times it's been bloody. Well, 1967, Nasser was threatened to annihilate Israel, and he closed off the Straits of Tiran, which is the straits that go up to Eilat, if you know where that is. And so Israel said, this is an attack on our nation. So they devised a plan, the Six-Day War, which is what resulted from it. And they surprised the Arabs because the Arabs are big at bluster and not so great at warfare. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they aren't. And so they got caught by surprise by the Israelis, who did a preemptive strike on a bunch of places. So they took out Egypt's Air Force, which is what Israel worried about the most. Then they took out Syria's Air Force. And then they conquered Sinai and the Golan Heights. And they started going into, and they conquered what's called the West Bank, including the old city of Jerusalem, which had been split since 1947. And the Jews could not go worship at the Western Wall or anywhere in the old city of Jerusalem. And they also took the Golan Heights, if I didn't say that, and they started pushing into Damascus. And I don't know if they were pushing into Amman, Jordan or not. They might have been. In any case, Israel was extremely successful with the reserve soldiers that they called into service to fight this war because Nasser was making threats of annihilation against Israel. So Israel took the old city, and very, very famous story in Israel. The commander of the paratroopers took the old city after conquering what's called the Givat Tachmoshet, is the hill of the Ammunition Hill, is what it's called. Ammunition Hill, which was bloody. It was very bloody. A lot of Israeli soldiers died. They managed to get through the Givat Tachmoshet, the Ammunition Hill. They got into the old city. They went up on the Temple Mount. They conquered the Temple Mount. And as they conquered the Temple Mount, the commander of the paratroops was sitting on top of the wall that goes around the old city of Jerusalem, and it's pretty high, so he could see what was going on. And he did this general broadcast out to everybody. He pushes the button, Harabait Biadenu. And so he announced to all Israel that the Temple Mount is in our hands. That's what he said in 3 words. Harabait Biadenu. And everybody in Israel just went berserko crazy because, wow, the Temple Mount is in our hand. That's where the temple was. And the Muslims had kept Israel out of that area, just for general visit and worship since 1947. They kept them away until 1967, 20 years later. And so everybody was going, wow. A very famous rabbi who was the chief rabbi of the Israeli army, he got out his shofar and he blew the shofar. And he said, Yamot HaMashiach Higiu, the days of Messiah have arrived. Everybody was going, maybe, maybe so, it's like that. So then the leftist leadership of Israel under Moshe Dayan, who was then the Minister of Defense, he was on the left, very far left. And he goes up and he says, Mani tzarich et Vatikan hazeh. He goes up to the Temple Mount and he says, why do I need this Vatican thing? That's what he said. And he gave the Temple Mount back into the hands of the Islamic Waqf of Jordan. Whole different story there, but in any case, it's in Jordanian hands to rule the mosque on top of the Temple Mount. And Israel was not going to be taking down the Dome of the Rock Mosque, not going to be building the temple. The days of Messiah have been postponed again by this guy who says in his own name, what do I need of this Vatican? So he compares the Temple Mount to the Vatican, which, whatever you think about it, it's like it's not the rule of the entire world. So that was in 1967 when he said that. And then just a few years later, in 1973, on Yom Kippur, those same leftists that were in power in the government, they made a fatal mistake of believing this spy in Egypt who was sending out, mostly true but partly false information that was just being read directly by the leadership of Israel in Jerusalem, that said that Egypt and Syria will not invade unless they have air superiority. That's what Israel was led to believe. So they said, well, we got air superiority. Our Phantoms are better than their MiGs. And so they're never going to invade. They might play games or whatever. Well, the thing is, Egypt and Syria were patrons of the USSR, the Soviet Union. And they didn't have great airplanes at the time, but they had very good anti-aircraft systems, SS SAM missiles, what it boiled down to. They had very good SAM missiles. So they didn't need air superiority with aircraft. They had air superiority with SAM missiles to shoot down Israeli invading aircraft. But Israel didn't know that. So it got to Yom Kippur of 73. Egypt invades, Syria invades, and Israel says, well, they haven't crossed the border yet, so maybe it's just a big military practice mission thing. There's a word for it. I can't think of it. Losing my mind on that. Any case, then they did cross. They crossed the lines, and Israel's going, what? This goes against all the intel we've been getting from that spy in Egypt. And he was a double spy. Israel was unaware that they were being led down. And that's where they go wrong. That's where Israel goes wrong, especially people on the left. It was just a few days after that, because Egypt had brought along these anti-aircraft missiles, and Israeli jets were getting shot down. They were getting shot down in Egypt and over Syria as well. They were getting shot down, and Israel's going, what is this? And they got fooled. And it's in Hebrew, it's called Hester Panim. They got the face of God hid from them, more or less what it boiled down to. And this time, Moshe Dayan, instead of saying, what do I need this Vatican for? He says, we are on the threshold of being overwhelmed and overrun and possibly losing. He called it Beit Shlishi, which is the third house, which means the third temple, which is what he used for the state of Israel, not for the Temple Mount. He says we are being threatened with the annihilation of the Beit Shlishi, which he meant the state of Israel. That's what he meant. And when he was on, you can probably find the video of him saying that, and he is swallowing very hard when he says it, and you can see that he is worried when he says it, because it looked like Egypt and Syria were going to be able to make a serious invasion into Israel. And so these Phantoms that got shot down. And so Israel has to turn to Kissinger and Nixon and Alexander Haig and all those guys back then. And from what I've heard or read, or maybe watching a video somewhere along the line there, Kissinger said, let's let Israel get a bloody nose. He said something like that. He said, we'll just let them have a bloody nose for a while. And Alexander Haig is going, I think we better help them out. So Alexander Haig started sending Phantoms over to Israel, and they started using them immediately. It still had stars on them, these phantoms, which were like kind of like sloppily painted over, and they put a Star David on instead of an American star. So what I'm saying is that Israel gets locked into a routine of things, just same old, same old. We just, somebody wants to do a terror attack and we beat them up, kill off the terrorists who kill some of us, and uh, they just get used to that kind of tit for tat for a while, and all of a sudden they get overconfident and they say our our great desire is to have a two-state solution. That's Israel. Leaders in Israel want a two-state solution. Why? Because all the rest of the countries want a two-state solution. Like Biden, for example, did you see the news that Biden says, "Well, we're glad that Trump finally finished the job that we started." Something like that. That's not a quote, but that is generally the idea that Biden managed to say is that, yeah, we tried very hard and Trump pushed it over the top. Oh, right. Right. Nobody in Israel was happy with Biden or Blinken or Kamala Harris. Nobody. Maybe a few people. Those few people on the far left. But the majority of people were not. So, the majority of people just want to sit under their own fig tree and live a peaceful life. Let all their neighbors also live a peaceful life. If they want to come and visit the holy places of Islam in Israel, okay, come over and visit. We're glad to have you. But not if you're gonna, not if you're gonna blow things up and kill people or whatever.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned that Biden had made a comment and about Trump finishing what they'd started, and I saw a snippet of where a reporter asked Trump about that, and I'm not good at remembering exactly how he said things or what he said, but basically it was along the lines of, everybody knows that's not true. And he had made a comment, if even a decent president had been there, a lot of these things had changed. And he said that a couple of times. I'm just basically an ordinary, a decent, an average president. And he said, "I'm a great president," which is, I'm laughing. It's just typical Trump bluster,
rhetoric.
and it drives
Yeah.
some people crazy. Other people like me laugh about it, and he's not. He's a better politician now than he was before, but he is not a politician. He's a wheeler dealer. He's
He's not a statesman. He's
no,
not a
definitely not a statesman. But
he's a show host.
yeah, so showboating for sure. So I take away the thought that this is monumental. It is. I mean, uh,
Absolutely. People
we're
in Israel think it's monumental. The guy I mentioned earlier there, Yishai Fleischer, he also did live streaming the whole way through. And at the end, he was going, "Oh man, I'm exhausted." And he was just watching. Plus,
yeah,
we had a holiday coming that evening, and he's religious. So I got to go. I got to get ready for the holiday. It's after 4 o'clock or whatever. And
yeah,
so, but even he said, maybe this is messianic. Maybe this really is a messianic moment in history. I'd say, yeah, we've been in messianic moments for a long time, but he's starting to see it possibly with the people of Israel here today in our time. So
yeah. It is it's heartwarming to see people reunited with their families. I'm
absolutely,
we all, I believe, as a people, people in the U.S., people in Israel, um, most people in what I might refer to as the Western world, want peace. We do want to believe that we can all get along, and I'm looking for people to start saying peace and security, because as a people of the book, as we're called, we know what that means. And so this is we do live in interesting times. We live in horrific times in some ways, but we do live in interesting times. Um, I guess I know you're up against the wall here with the clock. So is there anything else you want to cover in this that you haven't had a chance to? A thought that you might finish that I may have interrupted a few moments ago?
If you can think of something you want to ask about, that'd be okay. I mean, if you want to ask how close is the time of the end, I'm saying not enough information to make a judgment at this stage.
Yeah, there was a scripture I was thinking of earlier, and I tried to look through I have a few notes
Application.
in my phone that about things, and I'm gonna do it poorly, but it's pretty sure it's in one of the Psalms. It says something like it's the glory of God to hide a thing, but it's the
Conceal
honor
a
of a
thing.
king's to uncover it, or something like that.
It's the
And
glory of
and we
God to
go
conceal
ahead.
a thing. Glory of God to conceal a thing. The glory of kings to reveal, to investigate a matter that's been concealed.
Yeah, and that's where we are with where are we in the end times? Well, it's the glory of God to conceal it. And I'm not a king, but we always look forward to trying to see where we are in God's timeline.
Well, it says in the book of Daniel at the end of it, it says ad et ketz. Until the time of the end, it's all going to be concealed and hidden. It says it's concealed and hidden ad et ketz until the time of the end. So nobody knows. And even at the time of the end, there's a lot of things that we will not know. Uh, for myself, I'm still looking for the rebuilding of the temple, which is going to take another great kind of a miracle. So we'll have to see how that works out. But I believe that there will be a functioning temple on the Temple Mount, and that's, and who's going to take credit for it or whatever. I hope nobody takes credit for it other than giving glory to the Almighty for it. And the thing is, you can say that, oh, that's going to be Antichrist, where the Antichrist goes. And I'm going to say, first of all, Paul said the same thing. And after he wrote First and Second Thessalonians, he went up to the temple and he worshiped at the temple. Because at that stage, it wasn't Antichrist ruling the temple. So there's a place for Israel, even if they're still in unbelief, to be able to have a temple that's functioning according to the will of the Almighty. I mean, I think a lot of this what has just happened is by the graciousness of the Almighty. It's not Satan that wants to get all the Israelis back. Satan would just like to kill everybody. So God has his hand in things, even for people that are contrary to him, completely, not completely. The people of Israel aren't completely contrary to the Almighty, but they are generally, in the big picture about redemption through Yeshua, they've definitely missed the mark on that. But on the other hand, Christianity, Christian civilization through the ages has not been a great testimony of Yeshua to the people of Israel, to a lot of other people around the world either, unfortunately. So you can say that, oh, the Jewish people have always rejected Yeshua. I'd say a lot of it is the Jewish people have rejected Christianity, whether the Christian world has fully expressed the greatness of Yeshua or not. So that's a whole nother topic. We can go into that another time if you want.
Yeah, I'm reminded when you were talking about some of the atrocities that had gone on the seventh and surrounding that. It it reminded me of some of the things that happened during the Crusades. And a lot of Christians don't understand why it is that Jews don't trust that people from Israel don't trust Christians.
Evangelicals, if you call yourself evangelical, then you're in, kind of. That's Mike Huckabee, the ambassador of the United States to Israel. He
Mhm.
makes a big point about I'm an evangelical. Evangelicals are different. We're different. So that's the difference, which
Yeah.
glad for that.
Yeah, I mean the Crusades were that's
Well,
I hate to
in,
be
in,
tied with that. A lot of people say, well, you Christians, but see, that's I don't know that I don't want to say, well, it's because I'm evangelical. It's because I don't believe that was, I won't say I won't believe. That was not something that would be honored by God. I mean, it's horrible. Uh,
Well, then you've got the Inquisitions of the 1500s with Torquemada, and the Inquisition was in Spain, the Spanish Inquisition, also Portugal and other places as well. It was all over the place. But in particular, the Inquisition most well known to the people of Israel is the Inquisition of Spain. And why was there an inquisitor there? People inquiring into the faith and practice of the people who were supposedly believers, because the Catholic Church, there were plenty of Jews that decided, I've had enough, I'm going to become Catholic. Some of them legitimately wanted to become a Catholic. Some of them did not. They were forced. They're called anusim, who were, it's a word that also in modern Hebrew means rape, but in that context, it means they were forced to become Catholics. And after that, they were forced on pain of death to never engage in Jewish things. For example, Jewish people who'd been forced into Catholicism in those days, I'm sure it's not that way today, but in those days, if they lit candles for Shabbat, which is a Jewish custom to honor the Shabbat, it hasn't been rescinded. It's never been rescinded by Yeshua. He worked on Shabbat to do things that you could call pikuach nefesh. It's something that benefits a human being there at the time. It's like pulling a drowning man out of water. You're going to pull a man? You can't do that on Shabbat. Oh, yes, you can. If the guy's drowning, you can pull a man. So it's the same thing. You can do things on Shabbat, uh, in Yeshua's case anyway, that supposedly, quote, breaks the Shabbat when it's not. And of course, the Pharisees of the time and the modern rabbinical views of Shabbat, they also believe in pikuach nefesh. So they don't say that you can't help people, but they also say that a Jewish person is obligated to observe the Shabbat. So that's what the in Spain were doing, trying to observe the Shabbat because they were forced into Catholicism without many of them, but not all of them. But in any case, so they would be put on the rack to get a confession out of them to find out if they practiced any Jewish practices. And so the Jewish people remember those things. And they remember all that stuff. And I don't know, Catholic Church have repented from a lot of that stuff, and they've made confessions that said we have done things wrong in the past. And then there are a lot of Catholics, and they're the largest religious group in the world is Roman Catholicism. And then as a group, Christianity is the largest single religion in the world, then Islam, and then, I don't know, probably Far Eastern, syncretism or whatever. And Judaism is like a tiny little percentage of world population. And yet, you can't leave them a little home the size of New Jersey. So, whatever. So, we'll go into it another time.
yes, yes. I appreciate the time you've given me this morning. I know that your time is precious, just as mine is, and so thank you so much for visiting with me.
Gladly.
As we mentioned earlier, we've been friends for a long time, separated by a lot of miles right now, but I love you with the love of Jesus, my brother, and I'm happy things are right now very uplifting, and I'm sure the spirits are high, and I hope they get to stay that way a while. But until we
let's hope that we find our Almighty Creator in His fullness. That's what we
yes,
hope.
yes.
Then we'll rejoice for a long time. Amen. Thank you, man.
Thank
Glad
you.
to see you again. God's blessings on you and on your people there in the United States. God's blessings on Israel. Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim.
Yes.
Let us bless Jerusalem, the city of the great King. May Yeshua return soon, set up his kingdom of the world here in Jerusalem. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, I'm going to end the stream here, and then we will say our goodbyes and hope to have our brother on the video again. So I'm going to end the stream here, and or the recording, maybe I should say, and we'll.